Welcome to Podcast Envy Behind the Scenes. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder, and allow me just to make a couple of adjustments over here to my gear. All right, here we are in this live session where I'm giving you a little bit of behind the scenes of how I am preparing and repurposing content for Podcast Envy and the Creative Imposter Studios. The topic today is how to be an awesome host. So it's a little bit meta because I'm going to be talking about how to be an awesome host, but I'm also showing you how I'm crafting this episode. So if you do happen to tune in live, you can for sure ask me questions and I will answer them if they are pertaining to these topics. And if you are watching the replay, then never fear. You can still comment, especially if you are watching on LinkedIn. I honestly don't know if I have the settings open so that you can comment on YouTube, but you can for sure comment on LinkedIn and ask any follow-up questions, and I am happy to respond and reply. Podcast hosting is something that is near and dear to my heart because it's something that I've been doing for many years, but also because I have a background in theater, music, singing, performance, and I decided to bring on someone who also has a background in theater and acting and directing and performance to deliver this content so that it's not just me. And that someone is Karen Yates, who is the producer and host of Wild and Sublime, and who also happens to be one of our clients. And Karen is not joining me today. We already had a conversation. We already talked and recorded in Squadcast. And then this was for a master class. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what the Podcast Envy master classes are in a moment. So we recorded privately. And then that content was what am I saying? Oh, we recorded privately, and then that content got turned into an audio masterclass for my current studio members and clients at the Creative Imposter Studios. And that masterclass is delivered in the form of a private audio podcast feed that is generated and managed by a service and software called HelloSign. And no, HelloSign, sorry, Hello Audio. HelloSign no longer exists. It's now Dropbox Sign, and it is also a service and product that we use for signing contracts and client release or guest releases and whatnot. Anyways, it is a software called Hello Audio that provides private podcast feeds that you can use in a number of different ways. I love, 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 love them. And I will be putting a link to Hello Audio to check them out in the comments later and probably in the show notes for this episode. But the masterclass goes out as a private audio podcast. And then I condensed it, I reduced it, and made a shorter edit that will be going out publicly on the Podcast Envy feed as a public podcast. So it is not the same benefit that my private clients receive, but it is very useful, very full of great insights and tips for you about podcast hosting. It makes a great episode, and it makes a great teaser for an experiment that I want to do, which is that when I do these master classes, I do offer them up on Eventbrite, and they're complimentary for my existing members and clients. So they don't need to pay to participate in them. But the general podcasting public, as it were, is invited to sign up to attend those classes live via Zoom for currently they're priced at $99 for a 1-hour class. And they have the option to participate in a live Q&A at that time, or if they can't attend a live, they can send questions in ahead of time to make sure that my guest and I address on whatever that particular skill is. And so those are available to purchase a live seat to. But what I have never done is I have never offered access to that private audio podcast replay of the full class after the fact. And so that is what I am experimenting with now is I'm going to offer up part of the class for free in the podcast feed, and then I will be creating a link where you can purchase access to the full class. And that link is not live yet, but it will be. Hang on, let me see what I made it be. It will be thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host. So thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host is where the link will be live in order to purchase the replay of this masterclass. If you are like, Karen is a genius, I love this conversation between Andrea and Karen, I definitely can use a lot of the tips that they are talking about, and I want more. So you'll be able to get more, and that'll be available for you. Dun, 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 dun. Also, from there, the public podcast class, and let me show you where I've done this. I'm going to share screen. Maybe. So the software that really helps me chop up my content in a bunch of different ways is Descript. So what we did here is when Karen and I recorded in Squadcast, and then we took that, we recorded as video in case we wanted to chop up some video for social media, which we haven't decided yet about that piece, because even though I'm doing live stream video right now, I much prefer working with audio. I don't like editing video. Ugh. We'll see if we end up using the video or not. But basically what Descript does is it takes your audio file and it transcribes it for you, which is cool. And then you have the transcript and you also have your waveform audio at the bottom. And you can easily make content edits in the transcription, like a Google Doc. And I love that because it makes it very easy for me to create multiple versions of my content to use in different ways. So for example, we pulled the full recording in to the episode, or to Descript. And then I made a few edits, just a very light edit, just when Karen and I stopped and kind of talked about what we wanted to do next, or a direction we wanted to go, or there was like a tech interruption and things like that. Just some very light edits to the masterclass audio for the private podcast feed. I was able to edit that here. So this is the full class. And then just for fun in that private feed, I could have published it just as is into Hello Audio, but I decided to add this little chime. It's a royalty-free sound effect chime. I don't know if you can hear it or not here. Welcome to podcast. Oh, why is the audio coming out there? Any case, there's a little chime here that I like to put at the beginning of my private episode so I could drop that easily into Descript. And then I also have a separate sound effect chime that I like to put at the end, signaling the end of that particular episode. So for my private podcast feed for my clients and members, I don't want it to be a lot of work. Producing Podcast Envy is a lot of work. Producing shows for my clients is a lot of work. There are a lot of steps. There are a lot of things that go into it. And the only way that I can create private content separately as a perk and as a benefit is if it is not too much work. And so in that case, I like to do very minimal editing, make sure that the sound quality is good enough just with an automated algorithmical sound quality service like Descript Studio Sound, or a service that I like called Auphonic, or just making sure the recording is super clean and that I don't have this loud fan noise that I'm hearing right now from live streaming this as I'm recording. And just adding some simple sound effects here, but not adding like a fully produced intro or outro or anything like that. That's the way that I keep it simple for that private podcast feed. Then I can take that slightly edited full length private class, which is also going to be available to purchase the replay. And I turned it into Podcast Envy number 106 episode. So here I have a shorter edit. That class was a little over an hour. And this edit is 36 minutes. Now, it's more than half of the class that I took out, because even though this is 36 minutes, I'm able to also drop in some promotions in here. So I've dropped some markers of where I want my promos to go. Now, I am anti-ads. I do not like advertising in podcasts. It is the dynamically inserted ads that are inserted and selected by a company, an advertising company, and not by you as the podcast host and creator. They're not for things that have anything to do with the content of your show or the listeners of your show. B, they're louder than your show. Why can't that happen? Why haven't we figured out a way to make those ads the same volume as the show that they're being inserted into? Or is that like, does somebody think that that's a good idea to make them louder? It's like so jarring and horrible. Anyways, I am not a fan of the dynamically inserted ads through a third-party ad agency. However, I am a fan of using your podcast to promote products, services, opportunities, companies who are actually beneficial for your listener, who actually have something to do with the content of your show. And so that is what I'm dropping in here. I call them my Podcast Angels segments. And I also have a segment that's running right now in the show to introduce and promote a new service that we're offering at the Creative Imposter Studios, which is called the Creative Bash. And it is a mashup between the Creative Imposter and Betsy Bash, which is a social media agency that I have partnered with. And Lauren Ramsey, the founder of Betsy Bash, and I, as the lead strategists for our respective areas, get together and we dig deep into your podcast and your social media and find out what's working, what's not working, what your goals are, what you'd like to be different about your experience with making sure that your social media and your podcast are in sync. So Lauren and I had previously gotten together and we recorded a series of educational, informational short promos about using social media with your podcast that I'm inserting into my episodes, both to provide extra value for the listeners and also to promote that particular service. So I dropped in the promo that I wanted to use here. So that's a few minutes long. And also a promotion for the She Podcasts Live conference that is coming up at 2023, where I'll be doing a session called Be the Star of Your Show, which again is related to hosting skills, but also with the mind of a producer and showrunner. And so that is a promo that I've already dropped in there. And then you see this marker text. This is text. These are notes for me. In some cases, a script of what I want to say in that promo. And in some cases, it's just reminders of what I want to put in there. Sometimes I fully script my intros and promos, and sometimes I just put notes and then I kind of improvise it a little bit. And there are pros and cons to both approaches. And actually, Karen and I talk about that in our masterclass. I think part of that made its way into the episode, but not all of it. I think some of it is reserved for the masterclass itself. But talking about how, as a podcast host, whether you have something scripted or bullet pointed, or whether you actually are improvising, how to make it sound conversational, natural, not scripted, authentic, like you're just thinking of it for the first time ever. That is one of the skills that we talk about. And it goes back to that theater training, right? That performance and theater training. That's one of the things that you learn. And if you're like, whoa, 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 I never had that training, never fear. I've got solutions for you. So that's a little bit of the behind the scenes. Then once we've done full length masterclass for the private feed, shorter version for the episode with promos, I also made a separate composition here. It says juicy cuts from public episode. This is where I put the larger sections that I removed from the masterclass for the public episode. And I tagged that content so that I could remember what someone is missing if they are only listening to the free publicly available version, and what they would get more of if they purchase the replay. That's you. I'm talking to you. If you purchase the replay, I have notes here that you are going to get working with your editor to create a system of communication that helps them read your mind, even if the editor is yourself. You are going to get more voice tips and tricks. You are going to get information on hosting panel discussions, which is something Karen does really well. It's one of her specialties. More of Karen's pre-production and production process and workflow, what she does in terms of setting up her guests for success. How Andrea, that's me, thinks of her relationship with the audience. I cut that from the public episode. So those are the major juicy parts that you're going to get from the masterclass recording that you did not get or will not get from the publicly available episode that will be coming out this week, Thursday. In addition, you see all these things over here. I also clipped some of my favorite excerpts from the episode. And then our social media coordinator on our team, Caitlin, is able to take those clips that I've designated, which are about a minute or less, and transform them into audiograms for social media. Also, this transcript gets sent to our show notes writer, Lisa, and she is able to take this transcript and what she knows and understands about my brand and transform it into our full-length blog post show notes, which we then shorten for Libsyn for the podcast apps. We also use SEO testing for the episode titles, and then we create shorter versions from the show notes for social media captions. So this one recording with Karen ended up being so far the following. It ended up being, let me stop screen sharing here. This one recording with Karen ends up being, first of all, a very lovely, enjoyable conversation with somebody who I really love and admire. But secondly, it ends up being a private class for my existing clients to help them with skills development in a private podcast audio feed. It ends up being content for a public podcast envy episode. It ends up being promotional content for a purchase for a sales landing page. That's what I want for the purchase of the replay of the class for people in the general podcasting public. It ends up being content to talk about on a live stream here, which is social media, right? It gives me something to discuss and share with you. And it ends up being clips for social media, for audiograms. It ends up being a blog post. It ends up being my captions for social media and the suite of software that we use behind the scenes, as well as the team members who are specialists in each of their areas of production. That ends up being how we craft all of that content and all of those different touch points from one conversation. And that is something that when people say the word repurposing content, I flipping hate that phrase. Repurposing content sounds so boring. And it sounds like, when you get a grocery bag and you just like use it over and over and over again and it kind of degrades over time and whatever. I don't like that concept. I don't like framing it that way. But I like thinking about how you can maximize the amount of reach, the amount of engagement, and the amount of touch points that you can have with different audiences from one piece of content that you generate. So, not everyone is going to watch this live stream. Not everyone is going to watch the replay of this live stream. Not everyone is going to listen to my episode of Podcast Envy. Not everyone is going to be my client. Not everyone is going to listen to the masterclass. Not everyone is going to be on Instagram to see my audiogram, but they might be in one of those places. And so if I can give them content that has value and enriches their experience and solves a problem for them or meets a need for them in one of those areas, then that is great. And if I don't put the content there, that's also fine, but I've missed out on an opportunity to make a connection with that potential audience member. So that's the way that I think about not repurposing content, but I think about maximizing the reach and the effectiveness that your content can potentially have. And of course, it's very time consuming to make all of these different iterations of content, but it's also very time consuming to record a million episodes and only publish them as podcast episodes and not also find ways to engage with your various audiences in the various places where they show up and in the various ways that they wish to engage with you and consume your content. And that is my soapbox about content repurposing. Content maximization. Is that better? Is that a better phrase? Help me, marketing people. 1 second. Let me hydrate. Fun fact, that is a hosting tip about hydration. When you bring water with you to a recording session, this is a brilliant idea. However, if you are showing up to record and you are already dehydrated, meaning you're recording first thing in the morning and you haven't had time to rehydrate yourself, because we all dehydrate as we're sleeping. Like, it's just, we're asleep. We dehydrate. We are always slightly dehydrated first thing when we wake up in the morning. That's why, though I love to drink coffee or tea in the morning, that's like not the best idea. The best idea is water. Hydration does not happen automatically. Hydration does not happen instantaneously is the word that I want. Hydration does not happen instantaneously. So even though in the moment my throat is feeling dry and I can drink some water and that will satisfy it, if you are not already hydrated prior to showing up to record, then you are working against yourself and you're just like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. That's basically what you're doing. So when you know that you're going to be recording, one great tip is to hydrate yourself all day long from the first moment that you wake up prior to the time that you're going to be recording, so that you are already starting out well hydrated and you're not trying to play catch up during your recording session. And then, yes, have water with you at that moment as well. All right, so that is my behind the scenes of how I am using this content, how I am repurposing it, and how I am maximizing the effectiveness for multiple audiences, multiple platforms, multiple touch points, etc., etc. Now, let's go ahead and record our intro and our promos for Podcast Envy episode 106. I am pulling up my notes in Descript here that I just showed you a moment ago. And in this case, I have scripted part of it and not finished scripting the rest. So let's see how this goes. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klender. Today, you are going to learn, as my SEO tested title promises, how to be an awesome podcast host. And you don't have to take advice from me for once. I brought the amazing Karen Yates from Wild and Sublime into my Squadcast room. I brought the amazing Karen Yates from Wild and Sublime into my Squadcast recording studio to create a masterclass for my studio members and clients at the Creative Imposter Studios. Skill development masterclasses is one of the key benefits of working with our agency for strategy, production, and editing. And today, I am giving you a sneak peek. Now, it's not the whole class, it's just a portion. And I have good news for you. The whole class is available for you as a private audio podcast, and you can purchase that class right now at thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host. Once again, that's thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host. Side note for those of you who are watching this in the live stream, at this moment, that link is not live. But by the time this episode of Podcast Envy goes live on Thursday, it will be live. So if you already know that you want the whole conversation that Karen and I have, and you want all those tips and tricks and behind the scenes insights and strategies and solutions, then don't listen to this episode. There's no point. Go right now to thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host and get that full class and listen to that. But if you're not sure, if you're on the fence about it, far be it from me to do some kind of heavy-handed sales pitch. I am not going to do that to you. You are going to get a ton of value and a ton of great ideas that you can implement right now into creating your podcast by listening to this episode with Karen. We are going to talk about everything from pre-production before you press record to production while you're recording to post-production and editing and some mindset things. And, I chose Karen specifically for this class, partly because we have a shared history of sorts in theater, in performance, in acting, in crafting entertaining and engaging live experiences and also recorded experiences for an audience. And there is so much that we can learn from the theater world that goes into the skills of being an awesome podcast host. Now, you might be thinking, but Andrea, I don't have theater training. I don't have a background in theater. I am not an actor. I am not a performer. Karen says that there is a fair amount of performance that goes into being an effective and engaging host. And you might be thinking, but I don't want to perform. I don't want to act. I want to be authentic. I want the conversation to flow naturally. I want things to feel organic. And I will tell you that as a recorded piece of media, as a piece of content that is created specifically for someone to listen to and consume, part of your goal, part of your job is to entertain that person. And we've talked about that on some of the recent episodes of Podcast Envy. We've been talking about how the number one and number two reason why a human listens to a podcast is to learn something new and to be entertained. And if you are missing out on one of those two things, if you're just being like wildly entertaining, but you're not actually teaching them anything or enlightening them about anything new or bringing something new to the conversation, then you're missing out on half the equation. And if you're just teaching really useful content, but you're boring, then you are also missing out on maybe more than half of your opportunity here. I will tell you that I look for podcasts. I look for content when I want to learn something new, when I want to find out more about a particular topic. Like recently, I've been digging into learning more about PR and PR strategy. And so I looked up all the podcasts I could find that are about PR, and I probably found 8 different shows. There are more, but I added 8 shows that looked promising, that had current content and had episode titles that looked like what I wanted to learn. I added them to my podcast queue, and then I started playing each one. And within about 15 to 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds at the most, I knew whether I was deleting that one and moving on to the new show, whether I was deleting that one and moving on to the next show, or whether I was going to continue to listen to that one. And so I have narrowed it down to only 2 podcasts now that I am deep diving and binging their episodes, because I am learning what I want to learn. It's delivering on that educational promise, but also it's entertaining. The sound quality is good. The host is capturing my attention and engaging with me in the way that I want to be engaged with, in the way that makes it enjoyable to listen and learn something new, and it doesn't make it feel like a research project or something like that. And so that is what we're doing. And if you do not have a theater background, you can learn these skills. I mean, there was a point at which I did not have a theater background and I didn't know these skills. I think it was when I was still in the womb. I think I immediately started learning performance skills when I was born. So I can't really remember that time. I can't promise that that's what was going on. But you can learn these things. You do not have to be an actor. You do not have to be a performer. You do not have to have a theater background. But there is a lot that you can learn from those of us who do have that background that will help you to become a more entertaining and engaging host when delivering your content via podcast. All right. That was a very long, slightly improvised spiel. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. And now, without any further ado, I would love to welcome Karen Yates. So that was my podcast intro. Part of it, the initial part of it was scripted, but I wanted it to sound improvised. And then the second part of it was completely improvised. It was things that I had thought about and some notes that I had made about what I wanted to say about the context of this episode. And this is how I think about creating my intros, because I am thinking about, is it entertaining? So what is the surefire way to make a boring intro that does not entice people to continue listening? The surefire way to make a boring intro is to say, welcome to the show. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm Andrea Klunder, your host. Today I have with me a very special guest. Karen Yates from Wild and Sublime is blah, 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 blah. She's a somatic sex educator. She does this, this, and this. And if I were to read Karen's bio to you, that is on Karen's website or that Karen has sent me as a guest, if I read you her bio, that is the most boring way to do an intro. I think a long time ago, I had a whole campaign of like, do not read your guest's bio on your intro. You can put it in your show notes in the episode description. You can put it on the blog post on your website. It's much more interesting to know why you as the host chose this guest. What is your relationship with the guest? Why did you think that this person is the perfect person to introduce to your audience right now? What makes them incredible? For me, it was Karen and my shared background in theater. And so that enables me to talk a little bit about why Karen is here to talk with you. It also gave me an opportunity to talk about why you might need to hear this. How is this going to help you? Why should you listen? Why do you want to learn this thing? And it also gave me an opportunity to infuse some humor into the intro. Hopefully you found some humor in the way that I was presenting the content. So these are all things that I'm thinking about as I'm crafting my intro to my show, whether that intro is scripted, that I'm thinking about it ahead of time when I'm writing the script, or whether that is an improvised introduction. What you will never hear me do is read my guest's bio. Don't do it. Find a more interesting way to set up your guest or to introduce the topic of your episode if it's not a guest interview, if it's a solo episode or something like that, or a co-hosted episode. Find a more interesting way. Don't read bios. Don't be boring. Okay, so that's how I think of my intros. And then I am going to slide down here to my next marker in Descript. And this is telling me, to record my Podcast Angels segment. All right. And this one is scripted. It's time for our Podcast Angels segment. Podcast Angels are those companies, products, services, etc., who I know are going to make your podcasting experience so much more effective and enjoyable and entertaining. Maybe. You can be the judge. Today's Podcast Angels are Karen Yates and me. As I mentioned in the intro to this episode, this whole thing is an excerpt from a full-length Podcast Envy masterclass on hosting skills. Hosting skills sounds boring. Let's make that more entertaining, and we'll use our SEO counselor to do that. And our SEO counselor says, SEO counselor is not a thing. However, that title sounds so boring. Hosting skills. Let's make it more entertaining by calling it How to Be an Awesome Podcast Host. Hence the title of this episode. I recorded this masterclass for my private clients in the Creative Imposter Studios. And if you want to get the full scoop on how to be an awesome podcast host from Karen and me, that's twice as much content as you're getting now. Dun, 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 dun. I will now make a direct appeal to your sense of FOMO. Trust me, it's for your benefit. What you are No, I did this in the wrong order. Sorry. It's twice as much content from Karen and me. And you can get it right now at thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host. Once again, that's thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host. It is linked for you so conveniently in the show notes, in the episode description, in your app. And now allow me to make a direct appeal to your sense of FOMO. It's for your benefit. Allow me to make a direct appeal to your sense of FOMO. It's for your benefit. Trust me. What you are missing out on if you do not get this full masterclass is even more insight into Karen's pre-production, production, and post-production processes when creating Wild and Sublime. This includes her communications with the guest ahead of time and how she sets her guest up for success each and every time. Karen's signature episode style panel discussions, how to host and facilitate an effective and enjoyable panel discussion on your podcast. Even more voice acting tips, voice acting and self-care tips, how to work with your editor to create a system of communication that helps them read your mind, even if that editor is yourself, and how I think about my relationship with you. You want to know that part, don't you? Once again, you can get the full scoop on all of this content at thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host. And our next podcast angel is, and then I'm not going to say, I am going to say, it's She Podcasts Live 2023 coming up in Washington, D.C., June 19th through 22. You can still get a ticket. And you can get $50 off your ticket with the promo code Join Me, all one word. And I do want to see you there. The reason why I'm not saying it in full Podcast Angel voice, if you will, is because I actually already recorded that promo. And so it's already in the script. It's already in there. I don't need to re-record it again as such. Let's see. Is there anything else that I need to record for this episode? Nope. The Creative Bash promo is already there. And one more reminder about the recording. Hey there, what do you think? Are you getting a ton of value from this episode? I just wanted to remind you one more time that you can get the full masterclass conversation with me and Karen Yates at thecreativeimposter.com/be an awesome host. That class has another 30 plus minutes of fantastic content for you that is going to help you to become a more effective, entertaining, and engaging podcast host for your show. All right. I think those are all of the pieces that I wanted to record today. I know that we had a couple of live viewers. I don't know if anyone has any questions about podcast hosting skills in general. But this was a fun deep dive into a little bit of behind the scenes of my process. And it turned taking 15 minutes to record a podcast intro and some promos into a 42-minute live stream. So there's working efficiently for you. Finding different ways to engage with your audience and maximize your content is time consuming. There's no way around it. I'm so sorry to say, but this has been really fun. I loved sharing this with you. If you do have any comments or questions about any of the things that we covered in this video, please feel free to drop your comments, or you can always email me, Andrea at thecreativeimposter.com. That is, once again, there's my email, Andrea at thecreativeimposter.com. You can always email me your questions, your feedback. If you make a little voice recording for me as an MP3 or a WAV file or whatever audio file type, and you attach it to your email or send me a link to it, I may even play it on a future episode of Podcast Envy. If you want to hear the publicly available conversation with me and Karen, that is going to be coming out on Thursday of this week. You can get all of the Podcast Envy episodes and links to follow us on some of the major platforms at podcastenvy.com. And here is the promo code for you for She Podcasts Live. If you want to come hang out and join my session there, you can get $50 off your She Podcasts Live ticket with the promo code Join Me. And I think that's what I have for you today. I would love to hear back from you, any feedback that you have about this episode, any questions that you have about being a more effective and engaging and entertaining podcast host. And I hope you all have a very lovely rest of your week. Now, go make your podcast the envy of everyone else.